So good afternoon, and I am back with another tutorial video. And my last tutorial video was on salivary gland benign lesion FNACs, which I uploaded 5-6 days back on the same channel. And today, again, as promised, I am back with another hematopathology tutorial. And someone had requested me on Messenger and Facebook to do a hemolytic anemia tutorial, and I had told them that this would be a part of the as I go on moving in the chapters on hematopath. I'll come on hemolytic anemias eventually. So this is the first part of the hemolytic anemia tutorial. Um Before I start with this, I would like to thank all of you because we are close to 500 subscribers now, something which I had not thought possible actually when I had started these mini tutorial series, and it has been really motivating for me, and I had not expected this, and I hope that I can keep giving you more and more. I hope that I can, keep, meet up to the expectations that you have for me and from me, in fact, sorry. And after this, again, as I said, coming back to the topic. So before that, a big shout out to all my subscribers, all my viewers, all those who have, excuse me, liked and disliked the video both, because if someone likes it, it is very encouraging. If someone dislikes it, then I know that I have to improve myself. There's something still lacking in it. All your comments, your encouraging messages, your inputs are always most welcome. They motivate me to keep performing. So thank you so much, and big shout out to all of you. And so moving on to the topic, this is the first part of the hemolytic series, and after that I'm going to do a salivary gland video. But very soon, in between, I have this is for all those who are my subscribers and my viewers. I had a very interesting, or I have a very interesting hematopath case, which we are in the process of reporting. The case came yesterday. It is a leukemia case, and while reporting that, I realized that there are certain areas where still I get confused, or which becomes a pitfall for me. And I found a post chemotherapy marrow, not exactly a post chemotherapy marrow, but a marrow where a child comes in between a chemotherapy, supposing it's just taken 20 days, 25 days of chemo. Although yes, in leukemias, in some leukemias, 21st day, 14th day, these are the cutoffs for doing the bone marrow to check the remission status. However, I realized that sometimes the marrow becomes so difficult to interpret, and the morphology of the blasts becomes so difficult to interpret, that without flow, without IHC, purely on morphology, you get confused. And in most of the centers in the peripheral areas or medical colleges, you still don't have flow IHC in vogue, if I may use that word. So I'm going to be taking a very short tutorial on post-chemotherapy changes of the bone marrow and its pitfalls. This is an idea which has come to me. To all those who interact with me on Messenger, tell me whether you would like something like this or not, because I feel that this is something that as young pathologists, we don't have too much access. Yes, it's there in textbooks. Yes, you have some very good Indian as well as foreign authors and papers, but yet somewhere someone needs to put those images together and tell us, this is this, this is this, so don't get confused. So I'll try and do that in the next tutorial that I put. So I'll be breaking the chain there, and instead of a cytopath video, I'll again load a hemat video, because it is out of the blue that I got this idea, in fact, after going through the case that I was reporting. And then of course someone has requested me for PAP smears, and then someone has requested me for thyroid smears. I'll be doing both. I'm in process of making both the presentations. First I'll be taking PAP because that is almost done. Then I'll be taking thyroid in cytopath once I finish with the salivary gland. And so yes, that is what I wanted to tell you. And now let's begin with the topic. So I'm going to be dealing with membrane defects today. All right. So look, this slide is a bit cluttered because I did not want to teach you the theory of hemolysis. These images are from Tejinder Singh Sir's book. We all have it. We all have read it. What I just wanted to tell you, and you can read it again. These images are there. These flow charts are there. What I just wanted to tell you was that when you see a peripheral smear where there are schistocytes and the schistocyte index is more than 1%, there are spherocytes, there are eleptocytes, there are target cells, or you are not getting that population but you are getting one of the population, we have to always first rule out a hemolytic process. And when we are trying to rule out a hemolytic process, we have to rule out what kind of hemolysis it is, because if you can reach through the clinical data and the peripheral smear provided to the kind, then you can almost reach to the diagnosis. So that is why I have put these two table and chart side by side. This is extravascular hemolysis, this is intravascular. So when something breaks inside a vessel, it releases, when an RBC, not something, breaks inside the vessel, it releases hemoglobin, right? Hemoglobin will bind to haptoglobin. We all know that haptoglobin is present in the blood, was synthesized by liver, and as the free hemoglobin binds to haptoglobin, the haptoglobin level will decrease. This thing will not happen in a extravascular hemolysis, because extravascular hemolysis involves the reticuloendothelial system. It is not happening inside the blood vessels. Second point that I want you to keep in mind clinically is that when something is RBC is breaking inside the vessel, then either the excess hemoglobin as haptoglobin decreases will pass out into the urine as hemoglobinuria. Once it starts passing out through the urine, the filter, it will damage the that filter that the glomerulus makes, and this hemoglobin will also get deposited in that filter. It's something, it is a very crass example to use, but sewage jab flow karta hai, the filter will get blocked if the sewage is very sewage material, that water is very slushy and thick. Same happens in the blood. A lot of hemoglobin, extracellular hemoglobin in the blood makes the blood thick and slushy, and then that goes and clogs the glomerular filter. So some of it comes out as fresh hemoglobin, which is known as hemoglobinuria. Rest it gets deposited in the urothelial cells, which later on die and shed off, and it is known as hemosideruria. And of course, once the hemoglobin is leaving the body through urine, it is known as it is causing what? It is causing hemoglobinemia. You all know that. However, if it is an extravascular hemolysis, you will get the same picture on the peripheral smear. However, you will get features like splenomegaly, sometimes hepatomegaly. And there only you look for stercobilinogen and urobilinogen, that the pigment, the hemoglobin breaks into heme and protoporphyrin and then forms bilirubin, then biliverdin. You all know that cycle. So what I wanted to, what should I say, emphasize in this, by this image over here, is that extravascular means outside the blood vessel. In the spleen, the RBCs are breaking. So this involves the reticuloendothelial system, and this is in the circulating blood. But obvious, if it is involved in the RE system, the methemoglobin which is formed will always be formed when the blood breaks in the vessels, not outside. We all know how methemoglobin is formed. Plasma hemoglobin, of course, this is breaking in the spleen. So why would the plasma free hemoglobin increase? So it increases in the intravascular. Serum ferritin, here because the cell, the RBC is going into the RE system and breaking, so the free iron is getting stored. So that stored iron is increasing. Here it will decrease because a lot of hemoglobin is going out through the urine. Bilirubin increases in both, more in extravascular, as is evident by this entire table, as compared to intravascular. LDH increases in both. Urine may jo, if something is breaking in the blood vessel, then as I said, blood straight goes and filters as urine in the kidney through the glomerulus that is there in the nephrons. So zahir si baat hai, hemoglobin and hemosiderin will be more in the urine in intravascular hemolysis as compared to extravascular. Why all this is important? Because clinically someone can assess these parameters and reach to this diagnosis. So what are the causes of extravascular hemolysis? Thalassemia, sickle cells, hereditary spherocytosis. While acquired causes like PNH and enzymopathies are not hemoglobinopathies. Enzymopathies lead to, or sometimes I can also say, like blackwater, infective agents. These lead to the RBC breaking in the in the blood vessel in which it is flowing itself. So why this differentiation is needed? So that clinically you have an idea what you are dealing with. Alright, so that is why this differentiation between intravascular and extravascular hemolysis is there. Of course, tissue iron is more in extravascular because everything is getting stored in the reticular endothelial system. Reticulocyte is increased in both. And of course, haptoglobin is decreased, as I told you why it is decreased in sorry, let me just take the marker. Yeah, is decreased in your intravascular hemolysis. Now, why this? I have gone through this big chart for you, and why am I stressing on clinics is because yes, you can make most of the diagnosis on PS, but sometimes the hemolysis is so marked and the excuse me picture is so overlapping that you might not be able to make that diagnosis because the picture may look like a PNH mixed with an HS mixed or a G6PD mixed with an HS and you will not know what is happening. Hence, it is important to put two and two together and then elaborate. And why it is important to know whether it is extra up, you will think hemolysis is hemolysis. Why should I bother about what? Because the treatment at times depends on what kind of hemolysis it is. Or our diagnosis at times, the verification of our diagnosis depends on what kind of a hemolysis it is. Okay. This another lecture, this image that I have kept here just to show you the architecture of the RBC membrane, the proteins present, which in membrane defect are somewhere defective and lead to the anemia. All right. So BAN3 and Chirin 4.2, you should know these proteins. And the second thing you should know is this chart. N-chirin abnormality is seen in HS. Beta spectrin, you can look for beta spectrin. Spectrin and Chirin BAN3. Okay. Leads to HSHE. Protein 4.2 से क्या होता है? Alpha spectrin BAN3 4. You should know this and what kind of anemia it leads to. Alright, that is why, and this is the structure. Supposing this gets mutated, then this entire binding will suffer. Supposing this gets mutated, then this binding will suffer. And this is a lipid bilayer. This is the outer part and this is inside the cell. Okay. Again, now starting with coming quickly to the kind of membrane defects and anemias. There's something known as a hereditary spherocytosis. What happens in this is, as I've already showed you before, that N-chirin BAN3 proteins, they get mutated. Now, I have once told you in the initial lecture that RBC is a biconcave structure. Okay, and this biconcave pliable surface makes it easy for the RBC to flow out of fenestrated capillaries or in the reticuloendothelial system. The movement of the RBC is not hampered. However, in spherocytosis, this plasticity, this viability of the membrane to mold itself is lost. And what happens is when it tries to move through a spleen or through its sinuses, it starts breaking off because the entire shape becomes spheroidal, like a sphere, because of the mutation in the protein. And this is what is shown here. The biconcave structure, when cannot maintain itself during movement, gives off fragments which look like spheres, which are just fragments of RBCs, and they are then hemophagocytosed. And this is done in the reticuloendothelial system. Hence, you might get hepatosplenomegaly over here. Again, this because of this kind of structure and this problem, a lot of lactic acid gets deposited. There might be some enzyme defects also, and the sodium potassium pump, which is important for the membrane integrity also, the amount, the concentration inside the cytoplasm and in the serum, in the plasma outside, this also gets hampered because of so much lactic acidosis, which is there because loss of pliability of the membrane, and hence again it leads to lysis of the RBCs or damage of the RBCs, leading to anemia. Now this is given in the Hematpath Atlas, that what are the kinds of HS: mild, moderate severe, and severe. You get spherocytes to a large extent as you go increase with as the severity increases. And in mild cases, the OFT, the osmotic fragility test. What is osmotic fragility? Matlab, osmosis, you all know, movement of water and salt. So we expose the RBC to such a condition that if it was a normal membrane, it could have borne that condition without the RBC getting damaged. But if the membrane is not normal, then the RBC will get lysed. This is just to confirm our diagnosis in the mind कि हाँ ये HS है. ठीक है? So this table is there in the book, so I'm not dealing too much with it. So coming to the images, these cells that you see in the smear are spherocytes. Mostly actually these. I'll drop this one. So what you see in the smear over here, these are spherocytes. Okay. And the best way to recognize is it is a dark salmon pink colored cell without any central pallor. See here there is a central pallor, here there is no central pallor. Same over here. Okay. And then you go for the retic count. Since it is a hemolytic process, the retic count will be increased. Okay. This is just for your information that in today's world, to diagnose HS, we have flow cytometric analysis, where they study the BAN3 protein reduction and hence give you a diagnosis of HS. EMA is done. And what are the other differentials that where you can get an HS is congenital dyserythropoietic anemia type 2, hereditary cryohydrocytosis, and C ovalocytosis, Southeast Asian. I'll deal with this further on, so I'm not dealing with it over here. So this is the kind of phases that you can encounter a HS in. Either it is a compensated phase where you get good reticulocytosis, not too much anemia but still spherocytes, or it can be a hemolytic crisis or an aplastic. Aplastic is when the cell count goes so low because of extreme hemolysis, extreme stress on the bone marrow, the marrow stops producing cells and leads to an aplastic phase. And hemolytic crisis, you will get a lot of erythroid hyperplasia in the marrow. This is what I want to discuss more importantly. When you see spherocytes, you should not think straight of a hereditary spherocytosis. Before that, think of the more common causes. Spherocyte वैसे ही दिखना है. So how will you differentiate? If it is an autoimmune hemolytic anemia, you will get features of other autoimmune features in the smear with spherocytes. You might get aggregation, you might get rouleau formation, you might get some sort of a paraproteinemia feature like a bluish stain of this entire smear, which suggests that there are paraproteins in the smear. You might get plasmacytoid cells if it is a viral induced autoimmune hemolytic anemia. You might get a clumping, gross clumping, like sometimes when it is present in cold agglutinins. So that is how. So just spherocyte देख के HS नहीं सोचना. G6PD you will get bite cells. Transfusion, you will not only get spherocytes, you will get normal normocytic normochromic cells also. with macrocytic or microcytic cells means a multiple range of cells you'll get. Sepsis, you will get large number of polymorphs with toxic granules. Maha, TTP, you'll get clinical features, you'll get schistocytes, you'll get spherocytes. Copper poisoning, you might get vacuoles in the erythroid and the myeloid lineage cells with spherocytes. Okay. So these images just want to show you that spherocytes can accompany other features or condition. Most commonly they are secondary. So we don't have to jump to hereditary spherocytosis. So here you can see that there are parasites present with few spherocyte-like cells. Here you see a lot of schistocytes or acanthocytes. These are polychromatophils. They are slightly bluish. Okay, see this over here. And these are not spherocytes. This is a spherocyte. This slide, the difference is that this is salmon pinkish without any central pallor. This appears a little bluish without any central pallor. And bluish means these are polychromatophils. These are representation of reticulocytes in peripheral smear. If you stain for retic, they'll show you that they'll take up the methylene blue stain, the supravisy stains. Okay, and this is a bite cell. See over here. The spleen has bitten off that collection and given you a cell as if someone has taken a bite out of a pizza. Okay. Then again, this is a summary of if you see spherocytes, go for retic. If retic is high, go for immune mediated. If it is negative, if retic is high, go for a Coombs test. Coombs test is always positive in autoimmune. Negative, go for OFT and make a diagnosis of HS. If you see not only reticon but Gauche ball inclusions or Heinz bodies, you can go for maybe HBH disease or unstable hemoglobin or G6PD deficiency if they are bite cells. Same thing, just in flowchart. Next comes hereditary eleptocytosis. Now what eleptocytosis is, the cells appear elongated and elliptical like this. Again, it is this should be there in 25% or more. It is autosomal dominant, mild anemia, normal OFT and commonly seen at the tail of the smear. So don't call it HE if it is there in the tail. Types, typical HE is spherocytic where you will get 20% elliptical cells and spheroidal cells. Southeast Asian ovalocytosis. These are there seen in good institutes, but commonly we have to rule out the other causes first. Like most common cause of eleptocyte in PS is iron deficiency anemia. So you have to also look for microcytic hypochromic cells. What is the MCV of this smear? Look for the iron profile. Look for pearl stain if you have the marrow, and then go for a diagnosis of HE. Then comes MDS, myelofibrosis, megaloblastic anemia, thalassemias. So there are multiple conditions. So before labeling something as hereditary, do think. And don't miss these things also on a smear, thinking ki ye kuch nahi. See erythrocytes, elongated cells. Now this is a microcytic hypochromic anemia, and again you see elongated cell. So see this is hereditary eleptocytosis and this is a microcytic hypochromic anemia. Okay. This is a very good chart from the Google image that I have downloaded where you can see these are stomatocytes. Stoma means like a mouth, slit like a mouth. Here you see spherocytes. See, these are spherocytes and stomatocytes, known as stomatocytosis again. Cryohydrocytosis are stomatocytes. See, and it's not very evident in this picture. See, one over here and target cells. Okay, and one over here. Southeast Asian ovalocytes, you'll get oval cells rather than elliptical cells. Elliptical aisa hai, oval aisa hai. Okay, and you'll get a transverse bar in these oval cells. So you might mistake it with a B12 ovalocyte. Don't do that. Okay, look for this bar and then call it ovalocyte. And then xerocytes where you get target cells, and see these are poikilocytes. Okay. This is a good paper. This paper had the image, so you can read this for further clarification. Pyropoikilo, the word means like a flame, means pyro means flame shaped, poikilo means various shapes. This occurs this in this kind of a smear, you will get all shapes and sizes of cells, and this can occur in extreme hemolysis, be it in thalassemia, be it in some other hemolytic anemia, but the hemolysis is extreme. Sometimes even burn patients might show this kind of a picture. Fine. The MCV and here are the important points to remember, that MCV is almost normal to low, and the OFT might be increased because you will get spherocyte, acanthocyte, cystocyte, elongated cell, elliptocyte. I mean, just think about it and that cell is there. Okay. See, this is pyropoikilocytosis. So where it can mimic, you might think this is thal. Someone might think that this is dimorphic anemia. Someone might think some other hemolytic anemia. Someone might think burn. Someone might think infection. So you need clinical data to rule out why the pyropoikilocytosis is occurring. Okay. Stomatocytosis, I've told you what it is. It is an RBC with a slit-like mouth. Normal, it is less than 5%. In hereditary cases, you can see greater than 30% in smears. It's an acquired disorder and the cells are either overhydrated or dehydrated. Again, before labeling something as hereditary, always rule out the acquired causes. Stomatocytes, alcoholism, liver diseases, hemolysis, then of course hereditary, the band 7 protein is mutated. Retic, 5 to 20% mildly raised. MCV is increased and MCHC is reduced here. Please do remember. Okay. Xerocytosis or dehydrated stomatocytosis. Again, I told you to have target cells, pycnocytes, echinocytes. Well, means a lot of cells, not only stomatocytes. So this is a stomatocytosis, and here you see xerocytosis. Okay. See these kind of shrunken dehydrated cells. Okay. Acanthocytes, I've told you, an RBC with around 3 to 12 spicules irregular on its surface. Most common cause is liver, but you should rule out all these causes before naming something as hereditary. Also, the most common cause is liver, but this can also be seen in iron deficiency. Okay. See, these are acanthocytes. You have to count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This one has 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So these are acanthocytes. And there is a membrane defect leading to this kind of a picture. Lipid membrane defect. Okay? And too much of this leads to what is known as Purcell hemolytic anemia, with a very good retic response. 60% of acanthocytes in this cell. And these acanthocytes you need to differentiate from Burr cells. So these are acanthocytes. These are acanthocytes with target cells, and this is a Burr cell. Uniform projection on the surface of the RBC, commonly seen in renal failure and uremia. Okay. So this was a very vague but short kind of a tutorial where I wanted to, I've taken this before actually. I'm just repeating it now in a bit more detail, that if you see these cells in smear, before thinking of something as hereditary, always rule out the A, secondary cause. B, correlate with the clinical presentation of the patient. C, never ever ignore these cells. And D, if nothing, then always think of a hereditary cause. So that was my reason of taking up this topic today with you. Also because some people wanted me to take up hemolytic anemias, again the pitfalls. So I've done that, and most of it is there. I've told you whatever I've dealt with today is what you'll be asked in exams also. Nothing much beyond this. So I hope you like this, and I hope you are able to understand this tutorial. And I'll see you in the next tutorial, which I'll be making on post chemotherapy bone marrow changes. Okay. Thank you for your patient hearing.